Hi, my name is Lieutenant Colonel Samantha Granger. I'm 38 years old, and I've served in U.S. Army intelligence for over 16 years. My specialty, strategic operations, quiet, high-stakes work that rarely makes the headlines, but changes the outcome of wars. I've led teams across Afghanistan, coordinated missions that saved lives, and survived firefights and sleepless nights in forward operating bases. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the silent war I'd have to fight in my own family. Have you ever walked into a room full of people clapping and realized the applause was for a story that belonged to you, but had someone else's name on it? That's exactly what happened the day I stepped into my childhood home in Charleston, South Carolina. The house was buzzing with laughter and wine glasses clinking. A celebration was underway. But I wasn't the guest of honor. I was the ghost at the party. The man everyone was praising, my brother Ethan, was being congratulated for a military operation I had planned, commanded, and risked my life to execute. And while he soaked in the glory, my stepmother sipped Chardonnay and told me with a smile as sharp as glass, "Let's not make this about you." That's when I knew I hadn't just been forgotten. I had been erased. It was a sticky August afternoon when I pulled up in front of the Granger estate. Yes, they still called it that. The sprawling colonial-style house where I spent my childhood, now remodeled, repainted and gleaming, like it belonged in a southern living spread. My dusty Ford F-150 looked painfully out of place next to the BMWs and Range Rovers lined along the long gravel driveway. I sat in the driver's seat a minute longer, my fingers clenched around the steering wheel. The invitation had arrived just 3 days ago, a thin ivory envelope with gold lettering postmarked late. It wasn't an invite. It was a message. "We forgot you, but we know you'll show up anyway." When I finally stepped inside, the scent of magnolia-scented candles mixed with the sting of old memories. People laughed, mingled in cashmere and pearls, sipping white wine and talking about Ethan's heroism. I moved quietly through the foyer, passing a framed oil painting of our family, except it wasn't quite our family. I wasn't in it. They had replaced the old portrait. The new one had Mom's face, digitally removed. She passed when I was 11. Denise front and center in her place. Ethan in full dress uniform. I wasn't even in the background. I was a missing puzzle piece nobody asked about. Then I saw him. Ethan. He stood at the foot of the grand staircase, flashing his easy smile, shaking hands with a retired senator telling my story. Not a version of it. Word for word, the flanking maneuver in Kandahar I had coordinated after 42 sleepless hours in a forward outpost. I could barely hear him over the pounding in my ears. That's when Denise spotted me. She glided over all designer perfume and rehearsed charm. She put a perfectly manicured hand on my arm and whispered sweetly, "Sam, darling, you're not trying to steal Ethan's thunder with that uniform, are you? This is his day." Her voice was smooth, but the insult was razor sharp. She wasn't asking. She was warning me. I was an intruder, an afterthought, like an uninvited +1 to a party held in my own honor and stripped of my name. I smiled. Not out of kindness, but calculation. A ceasefire smile, because Denise had no idea what kind of war I'd been trained for. She didn't know I'd rehearsed this moment for the entire 2-day drive from Fort Huachuca. That the humiliation she just delivered so effortlessly would be the very thing that detonated everything. And I was ready. Denise's words didn't sting because they were cruel. They stung because they were practiced, rehearsed, like she'd said them before, maybe in front of a mirror, while selecting her earrings. I stood there by the fireplace, uniform, pressed ribbons sharp and still. I felt invisible. She didn't see me. None of them did. And if they did, they only saw the parts of me that didn't challenge the fantasy they'd built around Ethan. That night, I kept seeing the photo above the mantel. A silver-framed snapshot from my final deployment in Afghanistan, me and Ethan standing side by side in desert fatigues, the horizon behind us glowing orange with dust. But the version hanging there, it had been cropped. Sloppily, intentionally. Only the edge of my sleeve remained. The plaque beneath read, Captain Ethan Granger, Architect of Operation Iron Raven. That was my mission, my strategy, my team. I wrote that plan while Ethan was recovering from a sinus infection in Qatar. That plaque wasn't just inaccurate, it was surgical erasure. But it wasn't the first time. I remember my graduation day at West Point like it was burned into me. That June heat, the kind that makes your brass too hot to touch, was suffocating. My classmates were scanning the bleachers, waving to parents holding goofy handmade signs, mothers crying through their sunglasses. I was scanning too, looking for a familiar face. My dad had called the night before, said he couldn't make it. Big client meeting, he'd said flatly, like I was rescheduling a dentist appointment. A bouquet arrived instead. White lilies. I'm allergic. Denise knew that. It felt intentional. A sterile card signed, "So proud of you, D," like a HR department's sympathy note. Ethan, he sent a one-word text. Congrats. That was the moment I learned accomplishments only matter in my family if a man makes them. Years later, one Christmas that lesson repeated itself. We sat in the formal living room, fire crackling, tinsel sparkling, and my dad handed Ethan a small box. Inside our grandfather's Rolex, the family legacy. This belongs to the one who'll carry on the Granger name, he said, clapping Ethan's shoulder. I tried to smile. I was handed a red envelope. Inside was a $50 Amazon gift card. Denise actually said, "We figured that was more practical for your lifestyle." Practical. That's how they saw me. Not brave, not brilliant, just efficient like I was, an office assistant, not a commissioned officer with 2 commendations and a Bronze Star. But the part that cut deepest, everyone saw it. The entire room went silent when I opened that envelope. No one said a word. No one laughed. No one questioned it. Because that imbalance had become normal. And in that moment, I realized they hadn't forgotten me. They had decided I didn't count. I think if it hadn't been for her, I might have let them win. After that hollow West Point graduation, after the lilies, the one-word text, the silence, I sat alone in my barracks, still in uniform, cap on my lap, staring at the wall like maybe it could explain what I did wrong. The cadets around me were packing up, celebrating, heading off to steak dinners with proud parents. Me, I was waiting for the sun to go down so I could cry without witnesses. Then I heard the rumble of an old Buick outside. It was unmistakable, like the car itself had a voice from another era. I looked out the narrow window, and there she was, stepping out of the driver's seat, in her sensible shoes and pale blue cardigan. 8 hours on the road from Asheville, North Carolina, and not a complaint on her face. My grandmother, Evelyn Granger, 82 years old, stubborn as a storm. She didn't say anything at first. Just looked at me, really looked. Her eyes, that same sharp gray as mine, scanned the loneliness in the room. Then she pulled me into a hug. No speeches, no fanfare, just arms wrapped tight around me like she was trying to put my broken pieces back where they belonged. That night, she took me to a little diner off Highway 9. One of those places with sticky booths, vinyl seats, and a jukebox that hadn't been updated since the 90s. The waitress poured us black coffee, and we split a slice of apple pie a la mode. I was still in my uniform. People stared. I didn't care. Evelyn stirred her coffee slowly, then reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was warm but solid. Then she said something that would anchor me for years. "Don't you ever let them define your worth, Sammy." She said it not like advice, but like an order. Like a mission briefing. "Your light's too bright for that house. It scares them. That's why they keep trying to shrink you." Then she looked me square in the eyes. "Let 'em be scared. That fear isn't your burden, it's their confession." I didn't cry. Not right then, but I felt something shift. Like someone had finally spoken a truth I'd been afraid to admit, even to myself. She didn't tell me to forgive them. She didn't excuse their absence or explain away their cruelty. She gave me something better. Clarity. That night in that cracked booth, with her hand around mine, and the jukebox humming some old Patsy Cline tune, I stopped begging for a place at their table. I started imagining building my own. She didn't just comfort me, she equipped me with words that would carry me through a desert, a war zone, 1,000 hours of silence. And before we left, she slid a folded piece of paper across the table, her own address. "Anytime you forget who you are," she said, "come find me. I'll remind you." God, I held on to that like a lifeline. Leaving Charleston wasn't a dramatic exit. There was no shouting, no suitcase tossed down the stairs, no slammed doors. Just 2 olive duffel bags, my uniform, and my F-150 heading west toward the Arizona sun. My orders had come in Fort Sentinel, a classified intel base buried deep in the desert. And while my father may have thought he was sending me to fade into the background, I saw it differently. This wasn't exile. It was escape. My first apartment was a shoebox above a 24-hour laundromat in Sierra Vista. The walls were thin, the carpet stained, and the hum of industrial dryers below never stopped. The entire place smelled like a mix of fabric softener and burnt lint. I didn't have furniture, so I ate ramen noodles sitting on an overturned shipping crate and used my laundry basket as a nightstand. Ethan, meanwhile, had moved into a brand-new furnished unit in the officers' complex near base, complete with granite countertops, a gym, and a view of the Santa Rita Mountains. Dad had made one phone call, and the keys were waiting when he landed. I didn't even get a, "Did you make it okay?" text. But I didn't care. Not outwardly. Inside, I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting. My new commanding officer, Colonel Wexler, was an old golfing buddy of my father's. I saw the change in his face the moment he read my last name. His eyes narrowed, not in curiosity, but in judgment. To him, I was either here because of connections or because I wasn't good enough to be anywhere else. I worked twice as hard, stayed later, took on the graveyard shifts no one wanted, surveillance footage review, drone route analysis, psychological behavior modeling. I filed reports with diagrams, field simulations, and embedded contingencies. They sat unread on his desk for days. Then, like clockwork, a male colleague would pitch the exact same idea in a meeting, and Wexler would light up. "Now that's thinking outside the box, Corporal." It was like watching someone paint over your signature with Sharpie and hang it on their wall. But I didn't fight it, not directly. I didn't have the luxury of confrontation. I had to be better, sharper, quieter. I stopped speaking up in meetings. I channeled the anger into reports so airtight, you couldn't poke a hole in them with a nail gun. And yet, I remember one night, around 2 a.m., I was on my 36th consecutive hour of intelligence analysis. My eyes were burning, hands shaking. I reached for my coffee and spilled it boiling liquid straight onto my wrist. The skin blistered almost instantly, but I didn't scream. I didn't leave my desk. I just wrapped it in a paper towel and kept typing. Because in my head, one thought looped over and over. If I stop now, they win. I was exhausted, alone, and aching in ways no first aid kit could treat. But I was still standing, and for now, that was enough. The first time I met Brigadier General Daniel Rowe, I was hunched over my laptop in the Command Intel Center, half asleep, my wrist still bandaged from that coffee burn. It was just past 0500, the building mostly dark, except for the low green glow of monitors. I didn't even look up when the door opened. I assumed it was another junior analyst coming in for their shift. But then I heard boots pause behind me, not passing by, just standing there. Lieutenant, a calm voice said. That report on the northern drone corridor. That was you? I turned around slowly, expecting the usual glazed-over face of someone asking for clarification before moving on. Instead, I found a man in his mid-50s, Korean-American in full-service uniform, eyes sharp but kind. Yes, sir. I submitted it last night, I said, trying not to sound nervous. You didn't just submit it, he replied, setting a steaming ceramic mug down beside my laptop. You rewrote our entire understanding of enemy logistics in that sector. My team missed it. You didn't. Then he nodded once, like a quiet salute. That was brilliant. I couldn't respond right away. I just stared at the mug black coffee, no sugar, no cream, and felt the warmth seep into my fingers like permission to breathe again. Not because I wanted validation, but because someone finally saw me. Not my last name, not my uniform me. From that day forward, General Rowe became a silent force behind me. He didn't announce it. He didn't coddle me. But little by little, he made space. He invited me into briefings I had no formal business attending. He asked my opinion when others in the room didn't even know my name. He would hand me the floor and make them listen. It wasn't charity. It was merit. And it changed everything. The second light came on a lonely Thursday in late November. Thanksgiving had always been complicated. At home, it was about appearances, crystal glasses, roasted duck-hired caterers. At Fort Sentinel, it was silence. I'd planned to microwave a frozen lasagna and let the day pass like a blip. Then came the knock. Master Sergeant Maria Torres stood in the doorway, civilian clothes on a colorful apron tied over her shirt that said, "Butter makes it better." "Lieutenant Colonel," she said flatly, holding up a Tupperware. "You're not eating alone tonight. Get your jacket." "I'm fine," I protested. "Really?" She just raised an eyebrow. "That wasn't a request, ma'am." She led me to her modest house just off base. The air smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon. Her kids were building Lego forts in the living room. Her husband offered me a glass of cider without asking my name. No one brought up rank, or the army, or the holidays I'd missed. They just made room. And in that moment, sitting at their cluttered table laughing at a 6-year-old's joke about mashed potatoes, I realized something. Maybe family isn't blood. Maybe it's whoever hands you a plate and says, "You belong here." The phone rang on a Tuesday morning. It was just past 9 a.m., and I was at my desk working through logistics protocols for a joint training op. The number had a Charleston area code. For a second, I thought about ignoring it. But some small voice in me said, "Answer it. Face whatever it is." "Granger," I said, professional and clipped. There was a pause. Then a voice I hadn't heard in almost 2 years broke through, warmer than I remembered, smoother, almost rehearsed. "Sam?" "It's Dad." I didn't speak, just waited. "I was having lunch with General Fitzwilliam," he continued. "He mentioned you. Said you've been doing exceptional work out there. I wanted to say I'm proud of you." I froze. Those words, "I'm proud of you," were something I'd imagined hearing since I was 15. I used to picture him saying it when I got my commission, when I graduated top of my intel class, when I survived my first deployment. But hearing it now, wrapped in molasses and delivered with too much timing, it didn't land like I thought it would. "Thanks," I said, but it came out flat. Then came the pivot. "Actually," he continued like he'd forgotten the call had started as a compliment, "the reason I'm reaching out. Ethan's being considered for a major command position. It's a big opportunity, potentially career-defining. But he needs a top-tier strategic plan to round out his file. A beat." I told him no one could do that better than you. There it was. Not pride, not reconnection. Leverage. The call ended with a vague "think about it," and the next day, Ethan's email showed up. The subject line? Hey. The body was a single paragraph casually written like we were planning a backyard cookout, not military doctrine. Dad said you might be able to help me out with the proposal. You know I'm not great with the detail stuff. Let me know what you come up with. No greeting, no apology, no context. Just assumption. Just entitlement. Then Denise called. Because of course she did. Her voice came wrapped in syrup and guilt, like she'd spent all morning practicing it in the mirror. Sam, sweetheart, she said this is such an important opportunity for Ethan and for the family. A Granger in command, it elevates all of us. We're asking for your help because we trust you. She paused, then dropped the blade. This isn't the time to be selfish, dear. We need to pull together. Selfish? I almost laughed. They called it unity when it served them and betrayal when I said no. It wasn't just a favor. It was a trap. A setup to erase me again, only this time they'd use my brain to write the victory and plaster Ethan's name over it. I didn't respond. Not yet. But in that moment, I knew something deep in my bones. They hadn't changed. They were just learning new ways to use me. And this time, I wasn't playing along. It came in the form of an email. No subject line. No sender I recognized. Just a lone hyperlink and a knot in my stomach. My training screamed, "Don't click suspicious links," but some instinct deeper than protocol made my finger move. Something told me this wasn't malware. This was a message. I clicked. It opened to a military affairs blog I'd followed for years, the Sentinel Dispatch. Reputable, respected. Known for its detailed analysis of classified operations once they'd been debriefed and cleared for publication. The headline stopped my breath, cold inside, Operation Iron Raven. How one captain's bravery saved a battalion. Iron Raven. My operation. My screen blurred for a moment as I blinked hard, my chest tightening. I kept reading. The article praised a bold flanking maneuver, precision drone coordination, rapid intel assessment, under fire all elements I had crafted down to the footnotes. It quoted phrases lifted directly from the battle plan I had written in that dim trailer, sweating through my uniform while rockets exploded outside. And then, under a subheading titled The Commander, there was a photo. Ethan. Smiling in his dress blues, the caption glowing beneath him. Then Captain Ethan Granger led the charge that turned the tide of Iron Raven. It wasn't a typo. It wasn't a mistake. It was a theft. Strategic. Calculated. Brutal. They hadn't just taken credit for the future I wouldn't give them. They had reached back into my past and rewritten it. I stared at the screen, trembling not with sadness, but rage. A kind of deep, surgical fury that burned through my spine and made my fingers curl into fists. I grabbed my phone and called him. He picked up on the second ring, his voice calm, breezy. "Hey, Sam." Why I said my voice raw. Silence. "You know what I'm talking about." A pause. Then, look, Dad handled the press release. He said it was better, cleaner for the chain of command if my name was used. It's a competitive cycle, you know that. It's how the game works. The game, I hissed. You used my life like it was a resume bullet point. Another pause. Then the dagger came not from Ethan, but from my father, who took the next call. His voice was flat now, devoid of syrup of performance. Just logic. Cold, hard logic. "Sam, let's be realistic," he said. "You've done well. Exceptionally well. But you're a woman. There's a ceiling. Ethan's got the better shot." This move was strategic for the family. And just like that, it clicked. They didn't believe I deserved the win. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because I wasn't a man. Because I didn't fit their idea of what a hero looked like. Because they never saw me as the one carrying the Granger legacy, only preserving it long enough for Ethan to collect. They hadn't just stolen my mission. They were trying to erase the very proof I had ever led. But they made one mistake. They thought I wouldn't fight back. Rage is a funny thing. For some people, it explodes wild and messy. For me, it calcified into clarity. Cold, focused, surgical. A fury that didn't scream, it strategized. They thought I'd panic, that I'd crumble or stay silent out of shame or fear. But I've led counterintelligence missions in hostile zones. I know how to hunt ghosts, and now I was hunting my own stolen name. I barely slept for 2 days. I pulled blackout curtains across my apartment windows, brewed pot after pot of bitter coffee, and cracked open the encrypted server access I hadn't touched in months. The Army taught me well, metadata always tells the truth. I started with the classified archive logs for Operation Iron Raven. The first thing I looked for, the after-action report I'd submitted right after the mission, filed under my name with my timestamp and my field credentials. And there it was, AROP, IRAEVN 0427 LLTG, submitted by LTC Samantha Granger, April 27, 2021. Untouched, secure. But 5 months later, a second entry. Same operation, different handler, same content. Different author. This one, ARPIR AVN 0427, CAPTEG, an override request. Admin level access. Logged at 3:14 a.m. Who the hell was altering sealed military documents at 3 a.m.? I ran a trace on the IP. It didn't come from the DoD, not from a military base, not from a secure government terminal. It came from a private IP address routed through a firm in Charleston, South Carolina, Granger and Associates, LLC, my father's law office. I stared at the screen so long my eyes burned. It wasn't the Pentagon. It wasn't a covert cover-up from the top. It was him. He'd used his clearance as a contractor and falsified the record from his desk. I should have felt victorious, but all I felt was cold, sick. This wasn't just ambition. This was betrayal, deep, premeditated, and personal. He didn't just want to use me. He wanted to erase me. But I had something he didn't account for: redundancy. I opened the old green footlocker at the back of my closet, the one I carried from Fort Bragg to Afghanistan and back. Buried beneath my field manuals and the crumpled copy of Team of Rivals was a black encrypted hard drive, my personal archive. I plugged it in. Entered the 28-character passphrase, my grandmother's birthday, plus the coordinates of my first outpost. And there it was, my original full report. Handwritten tactical maps. Voice memos. Appendix C, the detailed breakdown of the southern flanking maneuver that broke the enemy line. All of it my signature, my strategy, my proof. They had rewritten history, but I had the receipts, and I wasn't going to leak them to a blog. No, this was going to happen where it hurt most. Public, formal, unforgiving. The Eisenhower Hall Theater hadn't changed much since the day I graduated. Same red velvet seats, same polished wood stage, same quiet hum of pressure in the air, the sound of young cadets about to receive the weight of command. But this time, I wasn't sitting in the bleachers scanning for a familiar face. This time, I wasn't invisible. This time, I came to burn a lie. The event was billed as a military honor ceremony. Ethan was slated to receive a prestigious commendation for strategic leadership in Operation Iron Raven, complete with a keynote speech, press coverage, and a slideshow. He was already in the building, shaking hands, smiling for cameras. My name, of course, wasn't on the guest list, but I didn't walk in alone. My grandmother, Evelyn, was with me, necklace of pearls around her throat spine, straighter than any colonel I've ever known. At the entrance, a young officer in full dress stopped us. "I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't see your name." Evelyn didn't flinch. She looked him dead in the eye. "Look at the insignia on her shoulder, Captain," she said evenly. "That's Lieutenant Colonel Samantha Granger. She has more right to be in this hall than half the brass inside. You can step aside, or we can speak to your CO." He swallowed, eyes wide, and waved us through. The murmurs started the moment we entered the lobby. People noticed. Eyes followed. Some recognized me. Some didn't. It didn't matter. We walked directly to the front row, where a sign on the seat read, "Reserved for the Granger family." My father, Denise, and Ethan were already seated. My father's jaw clenched when he saw us. Denise paled. Ethan's eyes darted to the floor. I sat beside them, said nothing, just waited. The ceremony began. Officers spoke, applause followed. Then Ethan stepped up to the podium, decorated in medals, smiling like the hero they imagined him to be. He started talking. My stories, my strategies, my maps. Only now with his name. And then the screen lit up behind him. I had sent the media deck to the tech crew earlier that morning from a burner email with updated footers. Every slide had a small, undeniable line of text at the bottom: Strategic Architect LTC S. Granger. Final Field Authorization S. Granger. At first, it was subtle, a flicker of confusion in the audience. By the third slide, the room was whispering. By the fifth, Ethan was stammering. And then General Rowe stood. He wasn't scheduled to speak yet, but when a brigadier general walks toward a microphone, no one stops him. "There appears to be an error in attribution tonight," he said, voice echoing through the auditorium. "The true architect of Operation Iron Raven is here with us. She planned the maneuver. She authorized the strike. She led the mission." He turned toward me. "Lieutenant Colonel Samantha Granger, please rise." For a moment, the room held its breath. Then the entire hall stood. Applause erupted, raw, real, earned. I stood slowly. Not smiling, not triumphant, grounded, present, seen. Ethan remained frozen at the podium. And for the first time in his life, he didn't know what to say. Backstage, the applause still rang in my ears, like distant thunder, even as the heavy silence of the waiting room settled around me. General Rowe had cleared the space for me, a kindness, really. He knew what was coming. I didn't have to wait long. The door creaked open, and my family filed in one by one, no longer a unit, but scattered pieces of a fractured narrative. My father, jaw tight. Denise, makeup streaked. Ethan, stripped of the mask he'd worn for so long. No one spoke. Finally, Denise broke the silence with trembling lips. "How could you do this to your own family? In public? Do you have any idea what you've cost us?" I looked at her steady. "Family," I said softly. "Is that what we are? Because for years, all you did was strip me out of every photo, every record, every moment that should have belonged to me. What you lost tonight wasn't reputation. It was control." She flinched. My father stepped forward, stiff with fury. "You humiliated us." "No," I said, voice level. "You humiliated yourselves when you decided my achievements were yours to allocate. When you justified robbing me by calling it strategic. When you told me I'd never reach the top because I'm a woman." I slid a printout across the table, the metadata logs, the overwritten files the private server registered to his firm. "This isn't ambition," I said. "It's fraud. And I've kept copies." The room went still. Ethan didn't speak. He just stood in the corner, shoulders slumped like a man who'd finally realized the borrowed armor he wore wasn't bulletproof. I looked at him not with anger, but exhaustion. "You could have built your own path," I told him, "but you chose to walk over mine instead." He didn't answer. And maybe that was answer enough. I turned toward the door, then paused. "To be clear," I said, voice now firm, final, "from this day forward, The name Granger is just a word on a birth certificate. It's not my identity. It's not my legacy. Don't call. Don't write. We're done. Then I walked out into the rain-scrubbed air of West Point Evelyn at my side. I took a long, deep breath. For the first time in my life, it felt like mine. Months later, we launched it, the Evelyn Initiative for Women in Defense, named after the one person who never flinched. At the launch event in D.C., I stood before a sea of young female cadets and seasoned officers, faces lit with hope, ambition, fire. I looked at them and saw the girl I used to be. Legacy. I told them, isn't what you inherit, it's what you build. Brick by hard-won brick. No one defines your worth except you. They stood and applauded, not for vengeance, not for spectacle, but for truth, for a new kind of family, for a new kind of future. And I knew in that moment, my story wasn't a battle anymore. It was a beginning. Have you ever felt erased, overlooked, or silenced by your own family, workplace, or community? Share your story in the comments. Your voice matters here. You never know who needs to hear it today. And hey, where are you watching from? Drop your city, state, or country below. We'd love to see how far this story has reached. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own strength, hit that subscribe button to join our growing community of real stories, quiet heroes, and unapologetic truth. Your voice, your story. You belong here.